Um, it kind of reminds me though of kind of somewhat conversation we were having during lunch and somewhat, the Spotify thing. But it's interesting as a writer now how much more technology offers you in terms of helping out your books. For example, the songs you're listening to are on my Spotify account in the Weight of Ashes soundtrack, which is because I put so much pop culture into this book, including a lot of music. It allowed me to compile that and put it into a little soundtrack that I can actually use to promote the book. And it's just a cool thing that you've got all this technology that if you are familiar with it and know how to use it, that you can actually take advantage of. In terms of using social media, or for that matter, newsletters or things like that. There's, whatever happens to work for you, whatever happens to give you the most sense of comfort and things that you can actually promote your work with. You should take advantage of it at every opportunity. Okay, so we are closing in on part 3. Hopefully, the first 2 parts have been good for you. And if you have any lingering questions, fire away. I'm just gonna chat here for a minute. I haven't really done, I don't think, the full spiel on broadleaf writers. I talked a little bit about why being part of a community is so important, and finding your people is so important. But for those of you who are not familiar with broadleaf writers, I do also want to be able to let you know that generally, especially right now, we have an ongoing list of virtual programming, one called Right Now, which is we've been running on Thursdays when they're scheduled. They're on Thursdays through Zoom, so you can access it anytime. The information is on our website, broadleafwriters.com, under the Right Now series. And the most important thing here is, because it's on Zoom, we have recorded every single one of these, and it is on our YouTube channel, which is just Broadleaf Writers Association on YouTube. And there are closing in on 30 episodes of Right Now that we've put on there over the last year and a half. And these are conversations with agents and authors, and even some with some Broadleaf board members who are in their own right getting published, and not just me. And these are great ways to go and get free programs and pick and choose what you want, because they're different genres and topics and different conversations just about writing in general. And they're good ways to just be able to view them and learn, and to become more familiar with other writers or other people who might be able to help you on your journey. And of course, I would be remiss not to encourage you to join a writing organization. Obviously, I would be very happy if you joined Broadleaf Writers. There's a membership, an annual membership, and we're working to build benefits into it. Obviously, a little bit harder to do any kind of in-person thing right now, but virtually we're trying to, that sounds a very funny sentence, we're trying to do things virtually that will benefit memberships for everybody. And in addition to getting the benefits of membership, you also help the organization as we try to grow and everything like that. So, but whether it's Broadleaf Writers or whether it's something in your area, I really, really encourage you to join, to put yourself out there, to invest in yourself when you have the opportunity to go to a seminar or a conference. I absolutely encourage you to go to conferences if you haven't, even the virtual ones right now, because you have opportunities like we're doing in the 6th annual Broadleaf Writers Conference on October 16th and 17th. We're trying to create opportunities to see each other in face-to-face, whether it's lunchtime chats that are like what we just did for lunch today, or we're doing a Saturday night reception where you can actually go into breakout rooms and talk with authors and agents and stuff like that, not one-on-one, but in group settings. And that's another way still, even though it's online, to be able to connect with other people. And though, again, I would encourage you to do stuff with Broadleaf. I will fall back on just the general policy of being involved. it's so easy now to be involved with groups that aren't even in your area. And it's so easy to connect with writers and to stay in touch with writers, even if you're not anywhere near them. That, I just encourage you to do it. Just get out there, meet people. When you meet them, connect with them in whatever way you can, social media, email, whatever. Stay in contact, share work, share your journey. It's very, very important that you find the people who can understand what you're going through and can help you. That found family thing, where you have a group of people who have formed this unit that are trying to help one another reach the same objective. So do check into it, and do look into whatever writing organization is nearby. I would be very honored if you would at least check into Broadleaf and see if what we're doing appeals to you. Because certainly when we get back in person next year, we're going to be doing some fun stuff. And thus ends the commercial portion of part 3. But anyway, so part 3 is taking us into if you look at a book from a 3-act structure, we would be kind of digging into Act 2. There are varying modes of thought on a 3-act structure or a 4-act structure. The elements are all still the same; they just fall into different parts of acts, depending on, like, I think there was the 4-act structure is almost an even division of 25%, 25%, 25%, whereas the 3-act structure is more of a 25, 50, 25 thing. So this part of the book, regardless of 3 or 4 acts, this part of the book is the big part. This is the part where everything really turns upside down, where everything is really happening, and where you're giving the reader that thing, that element of your story that appealed to them to begin with. Again, using The Weight of Ashes, this is the part of the book where the kids are journeying to Spook Hill to find the witch, to have the brother resurrected. So, you've had the intro and the catalyst, and you've had the theme established and everything like that. But now that normal world is turned upside down, and the journey has begun, and everything is against your characters. Everything is trying to force them forward while they resist. You have constant action and reaction in here, and it really helps develop the idea of the protagonist or protagonists needing to get over this unconscious misbelief that they have, and build from there. So let me get our presentation up. Part 3. All right. All right. So what we're talking about here is the hook, the B story, and borrowing a phrase from Save the Cat, the bad guy is closed in. And these are very, very important things in this part of the story, and the 3 things that I wanted to focus on because of that. There's obviously a lot more we can talk about. All right. The most important thing that we can get right here out of the beginning is the second act, or the second act is not the same as the first. Everything that you established in the first half has to be completely flipped. So Act 2 is the opposite of Act 1 in just about every way. We're not in Kansas anymore. There's that iconic moment where Dorothy steps out of the house, and thank you, technology, for offering me the GIF or GIF, whatever camp you're in. I guess this is back to cupcakes and icing from lunch. But that iconic moment where she steps out of what was a black and white world into a world that is literally the opposite. It is color. It is, there's not plains. It's not open sky. hills and trees and yellow brick roads and little people and all kinds of things. It is the absolute opposite of everything that she has known. Fundamentally, it is a new world and or a new world of thinking. So you have the literal interpretation of the new world, or you have the more metaphorical new way of thinking. This is where we begin to see the conflict between the conscious desire and the unconscious misbelief. And coming back to that principle, you have this desire of the character that is moving them forward, while this unconscious misbelief is continuing to create friction in their lives. Because as long as they continue to believe something that is false about themselves, they will continue to resist any form of change, because they don't believe that they can change. They don't believe that anything in there can be different about themselves. This part, the new world, the new way of thinking, is where you find your hook. And just to throw a definition out there, the hook is just simply the element of the story that hooks the reader, that hooks the agent or editor or something like that. It is the part that everybody fixates on. It compels agents and editors and readers to read your book. For example, in Harry Potter and Sorcerer's Stone, Harry arrives at Hogwarts, where he learns magic, discovers a secret plot to return the Dark Lord that tried to kill him, and copes with living up to being the boy who lived. Obviously, there is a great deal more that's going on in this story, but this is the element that drew people in to begin with. This was the part that made people pause and want to read it, to pick it up, want to read it. The idea that a young boy is going to a school of witchcraft and wizardry to learn magic, and that the built-in antagonist of this Dark Lord returning to kill him while he's coping with living up to being the boy who lived is what it's what ultimately got the book published. It's what made people pick it up and read it. And then the elements of the story are what captured people and made them want to read more. Now, in the movie What Dreams May Come, I'd put it as after a car accident takes the life of his children, Chris Nielsen and his wife struggle to cope. When a second accident takes Chris's life, his wife commits suicide, and Chris awakens in a dreamlike world of his wife's paintings, where his old friends long past help him in a quest to save his wife from an eternity in a hell-like existence. And I use this as an example for multiple reasons. One, because it's a literal transition of a living world to a dying world, which is completely opposite, obviously, from the world that he lived in. But also because we're going to revisit some of these elements here down the line. So anyway, we're going to go back to the 40-year-old virgin and see how Andy is doing. Now, the hook for this story is pretty simple. A shy 40-year-old virgin man with misguided help of friends attempts to have sex, hoping to keep his secret from the woman he loves. So we enter into the upside down world with Andy. Where he was at before, he is no longer. His friends are on this quest to help him achieve something he has not been able to achieve. And in doing so, have completely upturned his world. For example, his friend Cal advises him that he just simply needs to be confident and ask women questions instead of talking about himself, and has him practice on a bookstore clerk named Beth, who quickly becomes intrigued. His boss, Paula, suggests that he let her take care of his virginity problem, as she calls it. And to top it off, his friends talk him into a painful chest waxing appointment, which, again, talking about iconic scenes, is definitely one that has lasted. Andy's found family's misguided attempts at help have thus far only served to frustrate him. And in addition, not picture. One of his other friends, David, gives Andy his pornography collection, encouraging him to deal with the issue on his own time and own way. This again will take us into Karpov's shotgun on the mantle. For those of you who are not familiar with it, this is also referenced in Stephen King's On Writing, and it's a very simple idea that if you are going to show the shotgun on the mantle in Act 1, then it needs to be used to shoot somebody, to kill somebody in Act 3. Again, coming back to that principle that everything has its purpose, in your efforts to show the detail of every scene, of every location, of every moment, you want to make sure that you have a purpose to it. And even if that purpose is just to show you one thing amongst many others that will become relevant later, then you need to make sure that it has a purpose. And so now we're going to move into the concept of the B story. And the B story, in case you're curious what a B story is the sort of subplot. You have the main action of your protagonist, the main journey of your protagonist. And that is something you always have to keep a complete focus on. But the B story is vital to that journey. The B story is where the found friends come in, our found family comes in. The B story is where elements of the world, your protagonist is moving through elements of the world, not through their own doing, but because they're being forced forward. Whereas the main plot line is generally driven by the protagonists themselves. This is the part of the journey your protagonist takes on, whether wittingly or unwittingly, by themselves. Again, there are others, like Harry had his friends and they were going through their own journey, but he himself was dealing with the main plot line is where he was dealing with being in Hogwarts and doing everything by himself. And the A and B stories will eventually intersect, leading your protagonist into a need for change, for the change that they have thus far resisted. Again, it has a purpose, though it's a side story and a subplot. The B story converges with the main plot line, the A story, and that's what ultimately creates this need for change. Going to Harry Potter, Harry struggles to find his footing in a world of magic by joining the Quidditch team and learn new skills. Now, this is a B story. He is doing it himself, but it's sort of a side story. It's not paramount to the conclusion. When a mystery, which is the A story, leads Harry and his friends onto the trail of the Sorcerer's, Harry must choose whether he is up to the task of stopping the return of the Dark Lord Voldemort. Andy, on the other hand, while the B story carries Andy through various ports of call by way of the actions of his misguided friends, as well as diving into the lives of those characters, which is another important element of the B story, Andy is doing his own thing, and it's kind of working. He encounters a customer named Trish and manages to actually ask her out on a date. And at the end of the first date, they almost have sex, but are interrupted by her teenage daughter, Marla. Trish suggests that they postpone having sex, and Andy enthusiastically agrees. They decide to abstain from having any kind of sexual activity until their 20th date. And meanwhile, their relationship flourishes over the coming weeks. She encourages Andy's dream of starting a business and helps and encourages him to help fund it by selling off his collectibles, which of course is a point of resistance for him. He doesn't want to do that. After Marla argues with Trish over wanting birth control. Andy takes her to a group information session at a sexual health clinic where she is mocked for being a virgin. And we see a little bit of Andy's integrity here as he acknowledges for the first time away from his friends that he too is a virgin. And the act of doing that and the information that comes in with that actually ends up earning his respect from Marla. Now, again, I'm going to borrow from Save the Cat here. This is known as a false victory. It is a moment in which our protagonist, Andy, has done something that seems incredibly good. And he feels better for it. His journey feels better for it. Good things have happened from it. But that only means that the rug is about to be pulled out from beneath him. You can have a false victory, or you can have a false defeat. I was trying to think of an example in Harry Potter. Like in Harry Potter, it's a false victory because in Harry Potter, he's joined the Quidditch team. He has this match against Slytherin and he wins, and he becomes like this rated figure for doing so, and it feels like it can never get any better than this, and it doesn't, and begins to crash. But you can have it one way or another. You can either have a false victory or a false defeat here. Either way, it's meant to further turn the world against your character. All right, so the bad guys closed in is where we are at now. And again, you spent all this time building the story of your protagonist and your antagonistic force, whether that's internal or external. And now is the time when in your story, as you're closing in on the end of Act 2 into Act 3, that it all has to get terrible. It all has to become difficult. And obviously, literally bad guys, you have, after the series of success and failures, your protagonist is now ready to face off against the bad guys. But the question, which I think was brought up in our lunch, was, well, what if my story doesn't have any actual bad guys? And that's fine. Whether we're talking about actual bad guys or whether it means we're talking about the internal demons of your protagonist, the point remains the same. The fun is over. It's time to face the unconscious misbelief. This can be, their bad guy can be a literal person that is the antagonist, or it can be an idea. What was brought up was a story about two war vets and the experiences therein, and in that case there may not be an individual bad person, but the war itself can be it, or even the recovery from it can be the internal demon, the bad guy that they have to actually defeat in order to get there. But regardless, when we reach this point in the story, the sort of fun and games period that we've had leading up to this is over. It's time to get down to business. In examples of that, in this part of the book, Harry's on the trail of the Sorcerer's Stone. In What Dreams May Come, Chris is trying to save his wife from her hell. In The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West has captured Dorothy and her friends. And in Star Wars, the Death Star is approaching the planet Yavin and the Rebel base. Things are happening fast here. Your protagonist is at rock bottom. They feel as though they are worse off than when they started. All right, so some slides here coming up. Going back to the 40-year-old virgin. So this is a section that is kind of the fallout to everything that has happened to this point. It is full of action reaction sequences, and most definitely the bad guys close in. So obviously for Andy, the bad guy is his virginity and the fear that comes with that, and the misbelief that he won't be any good at it, or he won't ever get there, whatever it happens to be. So in this sequence, Trish tries to initiate with Andy on their 20th date and then gets upset when he resists. So even though they have their agreement that he made him so happy, and one of those false victories that ends up actually being a defeat in the end, he resists and he doesn't do it, and they argue, and they separate. Andy then leaves to go meet his friends at a nightclub where, reacting to the previous action, he decides to get drunk and runs into the bookstore clerk and leaves with her, in order to finally do the deed and lose his virginity. He heads back to her apartment. Now, meanwhile, Marla is convincing Trish to reconcile. She's not telling the secret, but she is encouraging her to reconcile for reasons she can't explain. And this is where our A and B stories are intersecting. At Beth's, Andy sobers up and decides to leave without having sex just as his friends arrive and encourage him to go back to Trish, which is an element to that found family, that though they were guiding him terribly through all this time, we're seeing their experiences with their own relationships and their own family, and they're beginning to change, and they're beginning to realize that, oh, maybe this wasn't such a great idea, to tell Andy to do all this stuff, and they're now realizing that the actions he has taken on his own are the ones he should be following, and so they are changing. They are coming to his rescue to help him see the error of their ways, and to guide him forward. But he doesn't go back to Trish. He instead goes back home to return. He returns to his apartment and actually finds Trish waiting for him. She has found David's porn collection, and though Andy tries to explain, she flees in alarm and disgust, and fearing that Andy may be a sexual deviant, which I suppose is a very fair thing if that's what you found. But again, this is a moment where it's all sort of coming to a point. So Andy hops on his bike and follows. A chase ensues, and he ends up getting into an accident and ironically getting thrown through a sign that says eruption. Now, that's a lot in a very short amount of time, and that all that sequence moves extremely fast in the film, and by moving fast, it doesn't give, and whether it's a reader or a viewer, it doesn't, and I mean this in a good way, it doesn't give them time to breathe and try to I don't know, process things, I guess, I don't know, but it forces them, along with the character, to move through this without really being able to resolve everything, and this is where you hear readers like, I couldn't put it down, or the movie seemed to go so fast, I was so into it, and it's just one of those things where you have to continually pull your reader along so that they don't have those moments of dropping out of the flow, or dropping out of the action, or meandering in their minds, and having these sequences of quick action and reaction will always do that. It is what will keep your readers reading and not want them to put down the book. So I mean, in this particular instance, it's not only moving fast, it's pulling Andy through the mud. It's basically taking everything that he's been through so far and making the worst of it. Because all of this is just born of his resistance. If in the very beginning he had just told Trish, okay, well, the reason I'm nervous about this is I've never actually had sex. Well, I mean, they could have had a conversation and they could have worked it out, and it would have been a terrible movie. So obviously he's resisting. His unconscious misbelief is driving his actions. Since he doesn't believe he'd be good at it, he therefore unconsciously seems to sabotage every possible encounter. His conscious desire to not be a virgin is at odds with his unconscious misbelief, and he cannot face what is known as his fatal flaw. That is the flaw of your character that could lead to ultimate doom. He can't face his fatal flaw until he reconciles them both, which ends up leading us to the next section. We have lots of time to talk about that because the next section is so big that this ended up being a little bit shorter. But we're going to be covering learning the lesson, returning home, and the finale. So for now, I'm going to talk a little bit more. And if you guys have questions, by all means, please ask them. Like I said, this is such an important part of the book that you're writing, the manuscript, the story, that you need to be able to hook your reader. You need to be able to, sort of diversify and give them more of the world and more of the characters around, while constantly doing this action and reaction sequence, leading to the tightening of the screws, leading to all of the the darkness, the evil, the internal demons, the actual bad guys, becoming more of a problem, becoming more present, becoming something that will actually possibly be the end of your character as they're supposed to see it, and as your reader is supposed to see it. So as I go here, please do ask any questions that you have, because that was a lot in a little time. But I do, with the B story, if I go through these one at a time here. The B story is a very important element of your story, because you could have a story, if you think of things like, what was that, 127 hours? Was that the one where the guy got stuck in the rock with his arm? Where that is an actual story where he is by himself, and the journey is all about, like, that is actually the crux of it, is that he's by himself and can't escape. But the majority of stories are going to involve a variety of other characters, and the stories you're going to write are going to involve a variety of other characters that are there to help on the journey. If we look at the 40-year-old virgin, the reason that his friends are so terrible in their advice is twofold. One, it's a comedy, so the worse their advice is, the funnier the situations are going to be. And two, in order to further develop the B characters and the found family, you have to be able to dig into what makes them tick. You have to be able to dig into their past. The same as dealing with the character work that you do on your protagonist or your antagonist, if there is a physical person. Your B story characters need to be fleshed out as well, and you need to be able to understand them as well as you can. In Harry Potter, you think about Ron Weasley, and though Ron is a pivotal part of that story and the story going forward, you really begin to see in this section what it is to be a seventh son in a family. Or a sixth son, I can't remember, sixth son in a family of seven. And just the torment that he has to deal with in being another Weasley, and in being, the youngest brother, and the one that is least likely to succeed, because obviously he has to have his obstacles too. Whereas Hermione's story is more driven within the walls of Hogwarts. We don't hear a lot about her family, other than they were not witches and wizards, which does separate her from everybody. But we also see how her sort of know-it-allness is both a blessing and a curse. It serves her very well, but she's never had to deal with other kids before, and the dynamic that comes with being in a school setting of this kind of magnitude. And so we learn a lot about those characters while they go forward with the main journey of the protagonist. And meanwhile, they're all working on a B story that's leading to something much bigger. And with the hook, this is one of those things where I come back to, what is your story about? And though that question is very theme oriented, the theme plus what's going on here in this section of the book is where you will actually be able to get interest. Obviously the writing and the storytelling is what's going to sell it. But you can get interest from here, whether you're pitching your book or whether you're actually selling a real book in the world. If you can take these two elements theme and hook and work them together, then you're going to have a lot more interest, and that's obviously an important thing. The questions are, if you guys have any, let me know. There's a really interesting thing that we're going to dig into in the next one in relation to the 40-year-old virgin, because to this point, the journey that Andy's been on has been very much in line with the sort of fundamental storytelling elements that we've talked about, and where we left off is where we're going to end up picking it up. But it's sort of interesting how, and a good study of how films can be made or books can be written, and so much effort can be put into so much of the story, and then something is sidestepped or forgotten or not done well or something like that. And it's a fun study to dig into, and I actually look forward to that. And question, elevator pitch would be theme and hook. Then, yeah, predominantly. If you look at, go back to what I had said with the Weight of Ashes, I have sort of the hook of the story, which is the events part that I had mentioned, about a young boy unwilling to accept his death, his brother's death, and his friend was taking the remains to the witch on Spook Hill to have him resurrected. Like the bulk of that line is in this section of the book. So the hook is a young boy trying to have his brother resurrected. And then the theme is how I would close that pitch, which is saying that the book is about grief and loss. So when you are putting together your pitches, or even when you're just talking to an agent, you certainly want to try to have as much information as you can in there. You don't necessarily have to get it down to one sentence, but 2 or 3 sentences at the most, to define what the hook is. And it's really, really helpful to throw in that theme at the end. Don't have to lead with it, just let it be the last thing that's on there, so that so agents and editors know that you are well aware of what your book's about, and the importance of that. For example, when having conversations with the publisher from the story plant for the Weight of Ashes, and the advanced copies were out, and he wanted to start talking about promotion going forward. He said something I'd never heard before, which is when he puts out works of fiction, he wants to be able to pitch it in a nonfiction way. Meaning, for example, in this book, he wanted to have me talk and have conversations with, like I have podcasts coming up that are grief oriented. So I will talk about the theme of the book in these conversations, therefore leading to a larger conversation about the book in general. And the reason that's important is, again, these themes tend to be things, large or small, that we as individuals can connect to. We like I said, we've all experienced grief or loss. We've all had family dynamics that were problematic at times, or relationships that fell apart, or whatever it happens to be, whatever your theme happens to be, love and loss, success and failure, grief and loss, wherever you happen to go, these are things that your reader can instantly connect with, obviously the agent and editor as well. And so it's important for you to know it and to include that in your pitch, because when you go out and have conversations, you're going to have conversations that revolve around that theme. Even in a normal setting where you're sitting virtually or otherwise, talking with readers about your book, it's still going to come up. People are going to want to talk about that theme that they relate to. And so it's incredibly important for you to identify it. And when you're getting your pitch down to what you're going to use to sell it with, then you need to have that brief understanding of the hook and include the theme with it. Let's see. Okay. Well, we've still got some time here, so throw questions, any comments, anything you got, and then we'll just kind of keep rolling with it. But there are a lot of elements in here. I do recommend that you find the Save the Cat book just to understand the story beats that you have to hit. I was trying to remember all of them in general, but like the point of, I go back to that we're not in Kansas thing anymore. There's that moment that you can really define through stark visuals and descriptions and details, that the separation between the world that your character lived in and this new reality that they're facing. And I think this is really one of those elements in there where being able to show how your character is reacting to this is far more important than like detailing or telling what they're experiencing. We go to the visual of Dorothy walking out of the door and the look of awe and wonderment, or Harry going down Diagon Alley or reaching Hogwarts. The expressions and mannerisms and even the reactions of those around him in that case really helped show the difference between the world and the dynamic that he was walking into. Whether that in that situation you have those familiar with it, and then you have his perspective of not being familiar with it, or in the 40-year-old virgin when he's outed himself. This whole world that his friends are trying to drag him into, or that they do drag him into, is very new to him. So everything that he experiences has to show in his, not just his mannerisms and his behaviors, but in his reaction to it. We really have to see the resistance of this new reality that is threatening to, in this story, undo the nice little calm, peaceful existence he had before. Let's see, get this one here. All right, Michael, the middle of any story, no matter length, is always the most difficult part for me to write. How do you handle your middles? Any tips for making that middle 50%? Yeah, there it is. Fun and games. That was another one of the phrases. Midpoint, bad guys closing in, less daunting. I think the most important thing that you can do is, again, if you understand the theme, and if you understand the unconscious misbelief, and if you understand the conscious desire of your character, it's going to be much easier to create obstacles that exist, whether they are physical obstacles or emotional or mental obstacles, and to go ahead and load them up. I think definitely I want to reiterate too with the Save the Cat thing, as much as and I think they actually even say this in the book, if I remember correctly, as much as I love the story beats and elements that they describe, and how well it really helped define for me what I was doing in my writing. It is important to remember that they, like when they throw percentages at you, short of the midpoint, because obviously a middle is a middle. But those ideas are ballparks. You sit there and say, well, the inciting event has to be at 10%, the fun and games has to be at 20 to 50%, then the bad guys have to close in at 75%. It's more about, if you read that and you want to study it, it's more about learning those elements and understanding what they mean. But then, sorry, Michael, I got a little off track. But yeah, I think this is one of those things where I think it's so important to know the journey, and then to allow yourself to both be free with your imagination and let the character and the world and the story drive it some. You will end up in places that you didn't expect to be, if you just let go, especially if you've if you've got a very, very thorough and detailed outline, which is great. It's great. I do that. I write thousands and thousands of words of an outline, especially in this section. You have to have the plan, but you have to be able to let it go. You have to be able to let it evolve on its own. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought so. Jessica Brody, is it Broyles or Brody? I can't remember. Yeah, that she talks about the percentages aren't nearly as important as a story if it has all the beats. But yeah, it's story building it's like for me, and I guess I'll finally answer your question. The beginning and the end are two things that I'm willing to do kind of loosely. I want to know where the story begins. I want to know where it ends. But this middle section is the part where I really want to be free with my imagination and get as much out as I possibly could, as I possibly can. This is where I want to push my characters and definitely find ways to put them to the brink of a success and just kind of knock them off. And it is one of those things that it's difficult to kick your character around unless you just happen to be a sadistic person. But you kind of have to, and you have to put them through the ringer, and you have to know those misbeliefs and desires and themes, because I think the more you know those elements, the easier the center of the story is going to be. What else? Anybody else have anything in there right now? Okay. All right. While we're finishing up this section, which we've got probably about 10 minutes, if you guys have any favorite books you want to recommend or anything like that, you can do that. Things that you want to point out that you do to answer Michael's question about how you handle a midsection, which sounds like a life choice. But yeah, go ahead and fire away. Yeah, Marianne, who is a very big fan of Leif Enger, which you really need to say very slowly. Peace Like a River is a great novel, and also a very great piece of storytelling. I definitely highly recommend that. But yeah, so well, I'll tell you what, because I know the next section is going to be long and actually push against time. Unless you guys have any other questions or points about this section, we'll finish a little bit early and move the schedule up. So maybe last call for questions here. Right now, our final section is scheduled for 3:00, but we can actually start it. I don't know. I need a little bit of time for the videos, but we can actually start it about 10 minutes earlier. So what I'll say is we'll finish for now and then come back at, I'll open up the room at 2:45, 2:50, somewhere in there, and we'll just go ahead and launch into it. Because I certainly have a lot to talk about in that particular section. Please do, if you have any questions that come in mind, bring them forward. We're going to have an opportunity to talk about stuff at the end. And I think that's good for now. So I will see you guys in about 10 to 15 minutes, and I'll have it open by 2:50. I just need to get this video first, and then we'll go from there. All right.